South Africans enjoy the right to protest, a right protected by the Constitution. However, the protests have been characterized by vandalism and damage to infrastructure. Common forms of violent protests include looting of shops, damage of other infrastructure such as schools, hospitals, and government buildings. This destruction can lead to decrease in economic activity and in some instances discourage investors.
Infrastructure continues to be important because one of the most important things that investors usually look at, other than the rule of law, the banking system, they also look into the infrastructure part. It's going to be easy for them to move things around. Is the communication network in place, stuff like that. So infrastructure is critical.
That is the disappointing part. Vandalism, destruction of property. Those are the things that unfortunately have become synonymous with our protest and strikes this day, and therefore they are not helping at all.
The state of the economy currently is being described as a ticking time bomb, as it could spark more protests. Many are frustrated at the lack of jobs and service delivery, as well as the rising cost of living.
When you get people to be in a situation where they feel they've got nothing to lose and people are hopeless, then people don't care, So, and I think for the government and whoever is involved, including businesses, have to make sure that people then don't get to be pushed to that kind of an extent that people start feeling like that. Because if they get to that point, by all means, one can expect to see more of this kind of social unrest. And yes, it takes two to tango.
Going into, in particular, the general election next year, because this is the opportune time, for anybody who's, feels, to seek attention, to say the elections are coming, you are going to come and do your door-to-door again, and you have not delivered on the previous promises. And therefore, this is when you listen to me. And I think that's why we're going to, we expect that in coming months, we're going to continue to see the flare-up of those protests.
The true cost of these sporadic protests has not yet been tallied, but is said to run into billions of rand. Finance Minister and his team at National Treasury are expected to have a hard time outlining spending priorities against declining revenue and collection when he tables the medium-term budget policy statement on the 1st of November. Key to this is whether there is money in the public purse to replace damaged infrastructure arising from violent protests.
For them to be able to match, to address the kind of rate of destruction that is happening out there, it's just simply impossible to do. This is the money that should ideally be focusing on providing new services to the people. It goes towards fixing, the infrastructure which was there already, but of course it was vandalized. So it's counterintuitive. It's not progressive at all, because at the end of the day, these infrastructures need to be fixed, but there is no money, to fix them if we're going to continue to see the kind of vandalism that happens.
In the west of Johannesburg in Finsbury, Randfontein, the community of Ward 2 says they've taken a different approach to protesting, although they too are dissatisfied with the lack of services, including inequitable housing allocation. She says the reason they protest is because of a housing project called the Montrose Project. Community members have been waiting to be allocated houses since around 27, yet there's no allocation happening. She says it's a problem, that is why they end up taking to the streets.
But there's no allocation. It's a halang for badudi.
Bule says they believe protests are an effective tool of getting the attention of those in power. However, they don't believe in vandalizing infrastructure. In fact, they discourage this act among the community by educating them on the implications thereof.
We must think when we protest. Because
she says people must think when they protest, because the very same thing that they destroy belongs to them and will need to be used at some point. If they vandalize schools, where will the children get their education from? If they vandalize clinics, where will they get health care when they need it? They must be careful when they protest. They need to learn the art of gathering and organizing themselves and speak in one voice on the guidelines of how a protest should be conducted. The community says the problem sometimes arises when incompetent and corrupt councillors gatekeep projects or allocate them to undeserving people. This often creates conflict. They call on others to break the cycle of violent protests and start a new culture of raising their grievances. Meanwhile, Masilela says as things stand, the budget for infrastructure spend has stalled alongside the shrinking fiscus.
Things that we see happening are mainly your major roads, where we see the likes of Central, upgrading the road, stuff like that. But generally, nothing much is happening. And anyway, the government itself just had a directive that there must just be a stop when it comes to the new infrastructure spend.
The MTBPS will take place on Wednesday, the 1st of November in Cape Town. Diabo Seto, SABC News, Johannesburg.